Welcome to the Minnesota Gold Rush. You heard that right, gold in Minnesota. A lot of people don't realize it, but it's here. Don't believe me? I'll prove it right now. There it is. Right there is a piece of Minnesota gold. It's actually two pieces. It's another one right there. Welcome to the Glacial Gold Hunter, where we look for the little pieces of gold left behind from the glaciers. Now the gold we find in Minnesota is tiny, but it doesn't mean those pieces don't add up. And as we run through material, I'll show you how much Minnesota gold we can get in a day. Now every river is a little different, and every spot in every river is a little different. It can take some time to figure out where the river hid the gold. But when you do find one of those strings, it can make for a really fun day. And I see another speck. Now, even though I can find gold right here, I think we can find better ground. And that's part of the fun, the hunt. Just like the pioneers in the gold rush, you gotta search around and try to find some gold to begin with. Sometimes it takes a lot of searching. You can think you know where gold is. Maybe it's there, maybe it's over there. But gold doesn't care. The only way to know is to take your shovel, dig it. Now you can read books and it'll tell you where the best places to look for gold are. And one of the spots it highlights is right behind a rock, because it's a low pressure zone. So in theory, this should be a good place to look, but the only way to know is to test. You can see the material behind that rock is very sandy. And we'll see if there's gold mixed with the sand. And I don't see a lot of black sand. Heavy black sand means heavy gold can be there too. Just a sniff of black sand and no gold. And personally, I haven't had the best luck looking behind rocks. Not for this flower gold, so we'll keep looking. And this is another place I highlight to look, the inside bend. You can see the river comes from back there and it curves along here. And right here, there's a low pressure zone, and you can see it's dropping off all this material. Up there, coarse cobbles, grading into sands, and then back into coarser material. So somewhere along there should be the right gradient of water pressure that the heavy material is dropping out, including the gold. So if I take a few test pans along there, I should be able to find a string of gold. In theory, but we gotta test. I'll take a test from in the cobble field. And as long as gravity is still working, the heavy gold should be at the bottom of the pan and the light material strips off. Come to think of it, we didn't do a gravity test yet. Sorry, flat earthers, gravity's still real.
Gravity ain't real. You know what?
And there's some nice gold along with that. And right there from that cobble field is a pretty nice speck of gold. So the inside bend for the win, right in those cobbles, so I know there's a string of gold there. But let's just test a little bit older and a different texture material and we'll see what's there. And there's still gold there too. And there's another speck. It's smaller, but it's still there. So it seems like all along this inside bend here is a good place to start digging. But you know what they say, big rocks, big gold. And since I found a bigger piece in the cobbles, I think that's where I'd start digging. Now the only way to accumulate a noticeable amount of gold is to go through more material. And we're not going to get much if we just collect one speck at a time, so let's do some speed panning and get through some material.
And I don't know if you've ever dug a hole before, but it's maybe the hardest thing you ever do in your life.
So now it's all classified to a uniform size. That'll make it easier to recover the gold. Now through the infinite wisdom of the Minnesota State DNR, or lack thereof, they have deemed a sluice box to be commercial activity. In fact, they make no distinction between a gravity-fed river sluice and an open pit mine. I'm not joking.
That's insane.
That's literally what the DNR told me directly. They literally want it to be backbreaking work, just so you go through less material. So to avoid commercial activity, we're gonna just stick with panning today. And once we get it down so we can start seeing the black sand, we just pile another scoop on top. It really doesn't take that long to chew through a pan. All the heavy material sinks down pretty quickly, and you can strip off that blonde material. And the DNR told me that the reason the sluice box is deemed commercial activity is because you can get through so much more material through sluicing than you can panning. Well, that's entirely dependent on the size of the sluice box and the flow going through it. If I had a giant sluice box, maybe. But the average size sluice box, I honestly think panning is probably faster. But without the sluice, you eliminate any disabled person, any elderly person, or any person not blessed with a strong back. I offered to take anybody from the DNR out to educate them on the process, so they could at least understand the craft that they're making rules on. They haven't taken me up on it yet, so we'll see how long my back holds out. One more pan. That's about 3/4 of a bucket chewed through. Let's take a quick peek. Wow, that was a nice run. So that was about a 3/4 bucket run, and that's the gold we got. I'm happy with that. So I would definitely say we're on a hot string, so I'm just gonna keep running buckets from there. All right, so now I got 2 buckets classified. Same thing, probably 3/4 full. We'll see what that looks like. So there's both buckets all panned down into one pan. There's quite a bit more black sand in there. I'm not gonna pan it down super clean out here in the field. We'll just take a peek. We'll clean it up at home. But I just want to see if we're still on gold. Yeah, we are. The Minnesota Gold Rush is still on. So there's the 2 buckets back to back. That is looking amazing. Well, with gold like that, we got to keep running. I got all day to run buckets like that. Let's keep going. You know, fish just love to swim around my feet. Stirring up the sediment releases bugs and stuff. They just have a feast. In addition to finding gold, I love coming out and looking at the geology. And the source of the gold we have here in Minnesota is right there, the glacial till. And you can see coming out of the bank, all these rocks, a lot of igneous rocks, metamorphic rocks, very hard crystalline rocks. And mixed in is a matrix of clay and sand. It's very different than the river deposits I'm digging. You can see the river deposits, they have all those cobbles, same thing that's in the till, but the matrix is a much better sorted sand. Coarse grained sand, some fine grained sands, but there's no clay in this because the stream washes it away. It's an alluvial deposit. But the till doesn't have that water flow. The till is just pushed there like a bulldozer, pushing all the way down the state, all the way down the continent, mixing everything up. And those boulders, they don't belong here. Here's what an outcrop nearby looks like. In this part of Minnesota, it's very common to find this very soft, well-rounded, very pure quartz sandstone called the St. Peter sandstone. But you can see there's harder layers of it. And you can see how angular this is. And when a piece of rock breaks off from the source, it's usually like that, very angular. And we can find chunks of rock that are farther down the slope that are very angular as well. That's a sign that it hasn't moved very far. In contrast, we find rounded pieces of igneous and metamorphic rock like this piece of gneiss, or this piece of granite. Now there's no outcroppings anywhere near here of gneiss or granite. Those outcroppings are hundreds of miles away, and scientists can use the mineralogy and geochemistry of the rock and trace it right back to the outcrop. And these igneous rocks would have come from northern Minnesota or even Canada, hundreds of miles away. And as it goes on its journey through the glaciers, it gets tumbled and rounded. All those angular edges break off. The same thing can happen in a river. But what is a glacier but a river of ice? This outcrop also shows a vast color differential. Now here it's a very white, pure quartz sandstone. Up here it's the same sandstone, but it's rusty red. All it takes to turn it red is a little bit of iron. Whether there was some iron-bearing minerals deposited during the deposition, or whether fluids came through later on carrying a little bit of iron, I'm not sure. But this layer is an oxidized layer, and that layer's not. But why is one oxidized and the other not? I don't really know. It just is. But you can also see really cool bedding planes in here. You can see these little laminations right here as they're kind of lapping down onto this bedding plane right there. There's no laminations in this one, but there are laminations here. You can see they're angled. So as this little bedding plane was being laid down, it was lapping onto that lower bedding plane. And this would be considered a small unconformity. This was deposited, and there was probably more deposited, but then that was eroded away. And then this secondary unit came lapping down on that. They call that cross bedding. And getting out and having the ability to explore some of the geology is very valuable to me. I love finding a few specks of gold, but I love looking at the geology of the areas too. There's a lot of riches to be found in this hobby. Even though it's a little backbreaking at times, it's still a pretty peaceful hobby. You know, I'm sitting here eating a cookie and all of a sudden that scene from Home Alone 2 pops in my mind. Where Kevin's lost in Central Park, so he takes the cookies he stole from the hotel room and starts eating it, but then he sees a pigeon. So he takes a cookie and he crushes it in his hand and he starts feeding the pigeon. Well, then the pigeon lady stands up, who may or may not be Piers Morgan. Kevin screams and tries to run away. Then he feels bad for screaming, so he apologizes, and they end up going to the attic of Carnegie Hall. I'm like, how are people getting in the attic of Carnegie Hall? They just let you in there? And then they become friends, and then when the bad guys are in the park trying to shoot Kevin, but they can't shoot Kevin because the gun is all full of shellac, the pigeon lady, who may or may not be Piers Morgan, comes back and throws birdseed all over the bad guys, and then the pigeons attack the bad guys, and they're picking the birdseed, and I'm thinking, well, that's not good for the pigeons because the birdseed's covered in shellac. And then Kevin gives her the turtle dove, and then they scream out, you spent $967 on room service, and I don't know if that's a number that's correct, but that's a number that's still in my mind, and I can't remember the last time I even saw that movie. And I don't know why my brain works the way it does, but all that just went through it. Anyway, I'm eating a cookie for lunch. Man, there's a lot of black sand now. I can remember that whole scene in Home Alone 2, but I can barely remember my scooper most of the time. I actually did bring my scooper, I just find it easier to shovel directly into the pan. It's just a bigger scooper. So here's the last of those next two buckets. You never know what you're gonna get. Could be a big picker, could be nothing. I predict a bunch of little specks. If you're gonna take part in the Minnesota Gold Rush, you gotta have the right expectations. Which means you gotta be content with finding a few specks. But those specks do add up, and I'll prove that by the end of the day. All right, let's take a peek. Oh, lots of little specks. Look at all those specks. Oh my goodness, this is a great spot. I'll take another round, please.
Another!
Whoops. Look at this one. It's just full of little pieces of little clam shells. Just loads of little clamshell pieces. You can see all little cross sections of them too, little broken clam shells. Super cool. You may have noticed I didn't bring my botella pan today. It's because my back is still shot from the last time I used it. And there's another 2 buckets. Man, when all this is added together, holy cow. That's cool. These are little bubbles that were locked in the basalt. A lava flow full of bubbles, and the bubbles were rising up, and you can even see that teardrop taper of the bubbles. That would have been an air pocket, and then it infilled with minerals later on. It's different than a crystal you often see in basalt. Here's an example of little crystals that were carried in the basalt. They're called phenocrysts. You see that one there, how square it is? That's a euhedral crystal, which means all the crystal faces formed. So that's the actual shape of the crystal. There's some other examples there. You can see how square they are. Whereas these ones are tapered. That's a bubble, that's a phenocryst. That's your geology lesson of the day, or second or third or fifth. Depends on how many I leave in the final edit. Now, we've been doing really well today, and I was concerned because earlier this morning I wasn't finding any specks at all. I've had people comment and tell me, oh, there's gold in every single stream everywhere in the world. You're not doing anything special, stuff like that. Well, that's a whole lot more true in your mind than it is in reality, because even in a gold-bearing stream like this, I was digging a lot of holes without finding any specks of gold at all. But we ended up finding a really good string of it, and I can't wait to show you. Now, the issue right now is, if I leave right now, by the time I get home, I'm gonna run into rush hour. So, it's either sit in rush hour traffic or sit in the creek and pan another bucket. Alright, one more bucket down, and it had some great gold in it. I'll get all this cleaned up and show it to you. This is my concentrates I'm going to take home. We spent all day on the creek, so you'll get to see what a day of panning can get you in Minnesota. But before we go, we got a big hole and a big tailings pile. And that is an absolute no-no to leave that behind. So we're going to fill our holes and leave no trace. I got a rock in my waders. Okay, our hole is completely filled. Now we can go. Okay, we're back at headquarters, and we got our concentrates, and we're going to clean it up. But I got this little contraption set up because today I have gold sniffing helpers. This one's Russell and this one's Doug, and these are my gold sniffing ferrets. I don't know if they sniff gold yet, but we're gonna work on that. So we'll get it classified to the same size and then run it through our cleanup sluice. But first we need to check for nuggets. There were no nuggets. Okay, so these guys are gonna help run it through the cleanup sluice now. He's trying to escape. No. I've been known to have a heavy hand when I feed the sluice, so I'm gonna try to feed it nice and slow. No, buddy. Don't chew on the cork, no. This isn't working out. They need a little more training. All right, so that's run through. Just pick it up and rinse everything out. And we're left with just a tiny bit to pan through. We'll see what a day of prospecting got us. Well, I can't find my jet dry, so I'm just gonna use a little Dawn dish soap. I just need to break the surface tension so the gold doesn't float away. Jet dry is just less bubbly than soap. Look at all that gold showing up in the corner there. And there it is, all cleaned up. Beautiful Minnesota gold. There's a dime for scale. We'll see if there's enough to weigh. .009. Pretty good day. And at today's prices, that's 96 cents worth of gold. The Minnesota gold rush won't get you rich. But if you think we're out there doing it for money, maybe you need to watch the video again. There's a whole lot more value to be found with this hobby than just money. Thank you guys for watching. Come on back for the next one. Bye-bye.